Hi, this is Arnav, and in this video, we're going to be discussing what would be the ideal roadmap and what are the things that you need to learn to become a professional Android developer. Quickly, a little bit about myself. Previously, I was heading the mobile engineering team at Zomato, and I took care of the revamp of the Zomato app that happened in 2019 and 20. And then I've been working as the lead engineer of the Android team in Target, India. In my journey as a professional Android developer, I have had the opportunity to interview almost close to 150 candidates for different kinds of roles, whether an entry level SD2, lead engineer kind of roles. I have been had the opportunity to interview all of them, and this video is going to be taking from all of those learnings to give an idea about what are the expectations that an Android developer in a professional setup at different levels, whether somebody is an associate or a junior Android developer fresh out of college and they have joined, what are the things that we expect out of them, what are the things that we expect at later stages. You could be just getting started with development or programming at the basics level. You could have worked on a little bit of UI development, maybe made websites or something, which can be a great advantage if you are working on another platform which is also UI based. And you could also be somebody who has tinkered with Android Studio, downloaded it and tried their first app maybe, but they're trying to understand what are the things that are required, what are the prerequisites for landing an Android development job. Now I'll just give you a quick overview of what are the kind of different levels that people are looking for when they're hiring Android developers. So at a basic Android engineer level, we are looking for somebody who can join an existing Android team. There are other developers there, and you can give them features to work on. You can give them very specific specifications that the screen should look like this, clicking on that, the data should go there, and they're able to build that. As you become a more senior Android engineer, especially somebody who has 2 years or more under their belt, that kind of person would be somebody in a very big complex app. They could be given an entire vertical inside that app. So for example, inside Zomato's app, somebody could be responsible for the restaurant page, the entire restaurant listing page, or somebody could be responsible for the entire order and checkout experience, and somebody could be responsible for your profile page, wallets, cards that are getting added, the entire payment experience. They might be working with team of 3 4 more other engineers, but they are completely responsible for the portion that they are working on. And for smaller apps, they could be responsible for the development of the entire app. And finally, like the Android team leads or the architects or principal engineer kind of roles that we have. In that case, we are expecting somebody who can talk to product and business teams and understand what the requirement is, and they can kind of visualize what has to be built inside the app. They can think of the larger architecture that needs to be done inside that app, and they can allocate that work to the team. They are the ones who are taking the decisions on whether you're building an app in MVVM or MVP, whether something's supposed to be reactive, or where the data needs to be cached locally or something like that. Those kind of decisions are getting taken by those people. So let's take a look at what are the requirements that you need to get to one of those places. But before that, I would love to clear a few very frequently asked questions that I face when I mentor people in Android development. So the first question is, I do not know programming at all. Should I start learning Android development? The short answer to that for me is no. I would say that you must understand basic programming to a level where you can deal with some data structures and algorithms, and you're hands-on with coding, so that when you start working on Android, right, by that time, syntax of the code is not something you're already fighting with. Okay. Next, I think a lot of people ask is whether they need to know Java before they start Android. I would say that if you know Java already, it's gonna be a very, very beneficial thing. When I personally started learning Android, I did not actually know Java, and I knew C++. And obviously I had to a little bit understand the syntax while I went with it. By the way, currently people who are working on Android development, new Android developers, everybody is working on Kotlin these days. But it runs on the Java virtual machine itself. So an understanding of Java definitely goes a long way towards helping you get started with Android. Another question that people ask a lot is, how much data structures and algorithms should I know before I begin? And to answer that question, I would say that if you are very clear with the basic set of data structures like linked lists, hash maps, stacks, queues, these kind of things, and you know how the operations work, and you know which data structure is suitable in which kind of an use case, that should be placing you up at a good point to start getting into Android development. Some of the very complex data structures like traversing graphs and trees and creating red black trees, BSTs, those kind of things might not be needed when you get started with Android development. On a day-to-day basis, those are things we don't need while we're building apps. Okay, what are the minimum specifications of my laptop or PC, and do I need to have an Android phone? For this, I would say, like, you do need a little bit of powerful computer, because the running the Android Studio, of course, takes a bit of resources. So something equivalent of a at least 8 Gen 9 Gen Core i5 kind of machine. At least I would say at least 8 GB of RAM. 16 is kind of preferable if you have, while the compilation process, it really helps if you have that. Do you need an Android phone? You definitely, I would say yes. You can run things on an emulator on your laptop, but that both slows down your laptop, and more than that, it's much easier to test if you actually have a device to test on. So I generally suggest going for that. Final question is making Android games and Android apps similar. This is something some people ask. They ask that whether when I start Android development, will that enable me to make games? I just want to clarify that what we are talking about today is about making Android apps, like some of the popular apps like Google's app, Facebook app, Twitter, these WhatsApp, these kind of apps. They are not similar at all to how games are made. Games are made in a very different way, and actually the way games are made for Android or iOS or even for desktop, that's all very similar. So that gets into learning Unreal Engine or Unity and making games using that. This is not related to that, actually. Okay, so big question, Kotlin or Java when you get started with? I would strongly suggest that if you're getting started today, you should get started with Kotlin, because the world in the Android development side, everybody is moving towards Kotlin in a big way. And even apps which are 8 years, 10 years old, which was primarily written in Java, the entire app, most of such apps, I know a lot of my friends in the industry, the code bases have become almost 50% in Kotlin, and it's continuously increasing. So maybe in a couple of years, you would probably very rarely find big Android apps that are written majorly in Java anymore. So if you're starting today, definitely Kotlin is the way to go. Okay, so things that are needed to get started off before you start even opening Android, I would say, is that object-oriented concepts and Java and Kotlin semantics. These are some things that I would place them firmly in the prerequisite bucket. So understanding things like, especially if you're coming from a different language, then how interfaces, abstract classes, the basic object-oriented nature of how Java works. Then is the dealing with the basic data structures that exist inside Java from before. So array lists, hash map, how the iterator works. So it's called Java collection framework in a group. So understanding that is also something very important when you start off with Android development, I would say. A very good understanding of different kinds of visibility. So what is a package? What is package visibility? What is public? What is private? How inheritance works? You should be very clear and thorough with all of these things. And finally, I think an understanding of how the exception management works. So when something goes wrong, exception is thrown. What is a stack trace? How do you try catch? They are kind of the basic stuff that I would say are prerequisites before we get started with Android development. Next, I would be, starting off with the basic skills that you need to learn in Android before you can start applying to, an entry-level Android engineer position. So the steps to do it is, first, obviously, go to developer.android.com, set up your Android Studio, open it, make your first project using the wizard, and even before editing any lines of code or anything, just build that app and see it runs on a device. That itself is quite a journey, because you will face issues in setting up maybe the Java SDK, maybe in setting up the Android Studio, understanding the project structure. That's the first step of the journey to do. After that, as you start learning things within Android, the first few things to learn is understanding what activities are. So, and then how layouts work. So activities are basically windows. So every time an app is opened on your screen, that's an activity, right? Layouts are how the UI is created on your Android phones. So how do you place a button at some place? How do you center things? How do you make a scrollable list? Those kind of things are, in the layouts. So when you're working with layouts, it's kind of important to understand a couple of concepts like what's a frame layout, what's a linear layout, what's a constraint layout, understanding which kind of layout you should use in what kind of a use case. Because, for example, something like constraint layout gives you unlimited freedom of designing a screen, but then obviously it's more complex to actually render compared to something like frame layout, which allows you much more limited options on placing things on the screen, but it's much simpler for Android UI to actually render it as well. Okay. Then the different kind of widgets that exist on Android, which is basically your, where you can put a text, where you can put a editable text where people can type, where you can put a button, where you can put an image, how those things, come together. That's kind of the things that you should just get started off. Then, again, we will come back to a little bit of theoretical and conceptual things that you need to understand at this level. So we need to understand that what is the concept of event-driven programs versus procedural programs. So a lot of people who start off with Android development, they're coming from probably history of making command line apps, where the command line program says enter the next number and you enter it. Okay, then it says enter the second number and you enter it. So basically the program is dictating what the user is supposed to do, right? In UI driven and real world application, it's more event driven. So even if you have a calculator, any of your calculator's logic does not run till the user places the equal to button. Okay, so before that they will press some numbers and something comes on the screen. So your logic depends on a listener kind of logic. So it is going to be listening for people clicking a button, and whenever it listens that okay, a button has been clicked, you have to run certain parts of your logic. Okay, so the logic would not run in a linear fashion. The logic would be written in terms of functions and kept in the code, and then there will be different listeners, like listen for the app to be opened, listen for the button to be clicked, and when such something is listened for, then a certain function is going to be running. So this is very different from a very linear flowchart kind of driven pattern that you start off when you're working with basic programming. Now when you're doing real world UI apps, you have to understand how this event driven model of UI event driven model of programming works. Okay, so then as you explore more in the Android world, what are the kind of very important concepts that is expected out of anybody who is an Android engineer is the very first thing is the Android activity lifecycle. So when your app opens on the screen, app closes down, when another app is opened on top of your app, what is the life cycle that happens? Because this is a very crucial interview question that everybody asks in Android interviews. Okay. Then different kinds of components that exist inside an Android app, activities which are basically screens that are rendered on the phone, services which are background tasks that can run. Then there are receivers and providers which you learn later on is like whenever some events are happening on your phone, like a charger has been connected, network has been disconnected, network reconnected, phone has rebooted. So those are events, and you can create a receiver to listen to such events. Okay, and providers are a way for your app to provide data to another app, or fetch data from things inside the phone, like fetch contact details, fetch storage data, those kind of things. Okay. Then next thing to understand is a very important concept specific to Android is the concept of intents. So intents are this little piece of information which tells what is the next step that you want to do, especially when you're going from one app to another app. Okay, so there can be a share intent, which is like when you open your gallery, you have your photo and you click on the share button, you get a lot of options. You can share it to WhatsApp, you can share it to Facebook, you can share it to Twitter. Those kind of things happen. But that's an intent. That's an intent to share. Similarly, when maybe you're in an email app and you're trying to attach a file, when you click on attach, then it shows like, okay, there's the file manager, there's the gallery. Where do you want to attach from? So that's a maybe file open intent. Okay, so these are different intents. How do we work with intents? How do we go from one activity to another activity? How do we go from one app to another app? It all depends on intents. So understanding intents is core to the understanding of how Android works. Okay. Then on the layout side, we need to spend some time understanding how layouts written in XML interact with Java, how the IDs work in layout. So when we design our UI, it's a little bit like HTML. So we write it in XML, we design a layout, but then that layout has to interact with your Java or your Kotlin code, right? So that's where the IDs are very important. Different IDs, the Kotlin code will actually call that button using that ID, right? Then setting up something like on-click listener, which is basically the event-driven model of working, which I was just speaking before. So you should understand how to set up such listeners. That's the next thing to understand. And then, as you start making actual apps, then we need to understand how to show dynamic data and a list of data. So if you see some of the most common apps that exist in the world, like say Twitter or Facebook or any social media, they are basically glorified lists. You open the app and it's a feed, it's a list of posts, and every post looks very similar to each other. They have an user avatar, title, the content of the post, and the body of the post, and all that stuff, right? So the data is dynamic. It's coming from the API. It's not hard coded inside the app. It's coming, they're making an API call, downloading that data, and showing it on the screen. So how do you show a list of dynamic data? That's very core to understanding how Android apps are supposed to work. And these are things which are kind of like very prerequisite level of Android development needed by everybody to learn. And at this point, you can make a few projects, like you can make a calculator app, or you can make a tic-tac-toe game. These kind of things I would suggest as projects that you can build at this stage, which gives you the level of confidence, to that you are able to actually make Android apps. Okay. Then comes another conceptual stuff. So these white slides basically are where I'm talking about concepts. The blue ones are where I'm talking about Android specific stuff. So when we are starting to build some projects, then the next part which comes that we need to learn is, how do we architect our app? Where does the data go? Where does the logic go? How does the screen behave to user input, and how does the screen show output to the user? So there is generally a model view pattern, where model is the data, view is what the user is seeing, and then along with model and view, there are different frameworks and different architectures we use. There's MVC, which stands for model view controller, model view presenter, model view model. So these are all generally called the MV star family of patterns, where we discuss that this is the data, this is the screen, and here's the piece of the logic that will actually take user input, modify the data, see changes in data, and update it on the screen. What is that framework of logic that will handle that? That's the star there, and there could be different things in star. And these days, what's very common in the Android world is using the MVVM architecture. But when you're going for interviews, it will be expected that what is also MVC and MVP, and you can differentiate between them, and you can tell the pros and cons of each of those architectures. Okay. Separating your concerns, like UI stuff should not, changes in the UI should not need changes in the data layer changes should not need changes in the logic layer. So how to build an app keeping these things separate, that's kind of very important. Okay. So covering these things are very important when you want to start making more complex apps beyond something like a calculator or a tic-tac-toe game, right? Then I think closing up the set of requirements that are needed for every Android developer, even at an entry level, comes the Android architecture components, which is a set of libraries and frameworks created by Google, which helps in most of the common things that are needed while Android development. It's also known by the name of Jetpack. What are fragments? So fragments are pieces of your fragments of your app, basically, which is like a UI plus a little bit of UI related logic inside a fragment. So you can encapsulate slices of views in terms of fragments, and you can reuse the same fragment in different screens of your app, in different activities of your app. So understanding how the fragments work, the life cycle of the fragment. Then in terms of MVVM, which is like a very common pattern these days using Android development, so understanding how the view model works. How does live data work, which is like a reactive way of saving data, changes automatically shown on the screen. The repository pattern, like fetching data from the internet or from a database, how that works. Okay. And a little bit of understanding of local database management using SQLites on Android. Local data is generally stored in SQLite databases, so how do you save that, and using ORMs to do that. At this point, you can make like maybe a task list manager, or people can add tasks, and within every task they can add nodes. These kind of apps you can make at this stage. Okay. And you should make Android projects using all these architecture components that you have learned. Okay. And finally, there are a bunch of third-party libraries, common Android libraries, which are used in making almost all Android apps. Having a little bit of hands-on experience with them is something people would be expecting, because if you have made any real-world app, even as a side project, they would be using some of these libraries. So for example, for most network-related stuff, we use OKHTTP and Retrofit, which are libraries created by Square open source. Retrofit is for making REST API calls. OKHTTP is for making any network calls. Glide is an image rendering library, which is used to render images from a URL to your phone screen. Then serialization. So when you're making API calls, the data is usually coming in form of JSON or XML. So we use something like Jackson, JSON, or Moshi to do the serialization work, like turning a JSON object into a Java object. Okay, and back as well. So when you're sending data, then a Java object has to be turned back into JSON. Okay, and understanding of at this stage, you should also be kind of adept at understanding the multi-threaded nature. So Android obviously is a multi-threaded operating system, and you should not be doing some very heavy duty work on the main thread of your Android app, because if you do that, then your UI starts becoming very janky. And then if you do something that holds the UI for more than 4 or 5 seconds, then Android gives a pop-up that application is not responding as well. So any big pieces of logic, data manipulation, those kind of things should happen in background threads while the UI remains free to operate for the user. It does not get stuck. Okay. After you have learned these things, you can probably at a place where you can build something like, there is GitHub's API using which you can make like an app which tracks the trending repositories on GitHub today, something like that. Or you can use Imgur, which is a photo sharing website, use the API of Imgur and create a clone of Instagram using that data. So these kind of apps you can start making. And these apps now start looking like projects which you can actually put up on the Play Store for fun. These are fun apps, or, like some people might even download it and use it. It might not be kind of apps for which you can get funded and run a startup. It's not such big an idea, but these are actually finished apps that you can put up on the Play Store, and then people might download and use it. Side project kind of things can happen out of this. So congratulations, at this point you are an entry-level Android engineer. Most companies which in general are looking for SD1 level Android engineers, they're hiring. This is the level of skill set that they're looking. So everything that we discussed till now, you have to learn all of these things to be able to get into an Android engineer role. Okay. So now that you are, qualified as an Android engineer, how do you scale up from here? What are the things that you need to learn to become like a senior Android engineer? And what are the kind of requirements that a professional place would have from Android team leads? Okay, so let's talk about those things. So again, some conceptual things that you need to learn at this stage is you have to go deep into multi-threading. Once you start working on any desktop apps that you're making, or where the backend apps you're making or mobile apps you're making, everywhere, like one of the very important components that make a bridge between like entry-level junior engineers to a senior engineer is the concept of multi-threading, concurrency, parallelism. Because as the tasks start getting more complex, you obviously have to parallelize your things. And in terms of Android, it's obviously like a little bit more complicated by the fact that there is one thread which is responsible for drawing the UI of the screen, and you can't do a lot of things there. Okay, there is also restrictions on what are the things that you can do on the main thread. You can't do network actions on the main thread. The app will crash if you do that. Android does not allow doing that. Okay, understanding that what kind of tasks do take more time, like writing data from the disk, writing data from the network. These kind of things can take more time. How do we put them into a background thread? Also, it's important to understand is that the user needs responsiveness. They don't want to feel like the app has paused or stopped or something like that. So keeping all of these things in mind, you have to understand how to do multi-threading, how to create a pool of threads in which some of your computation heavy tasks can be run. And once those tasks are done, how do you show the result back into your UI? Okay, so these are the kind of concepts that are very important to learn. And then you have to go a little deeper into the language specific stuff, like for Java, Kotlin specific things, like understand why we need synchronized methods. So synchronized methods are methods whose body can be executed at a time only by a thread. Okay, understanding what volatile variables are. Volatile variables, are variables whose data could have been changed by a different thread. So again, I'm not getting very deep into these concepts right now in this video, but these are things that you need to understand: how race conditions happen, how synchronized, volatile, why they are used, where they are used. Okay. Then you need to understand a little bit about object-oriented design patterns, which you need as your app starts getting more complex. If you're looking at an app which consists of 15-20 Java files, you don't really start seeing the need for design patterns. But when you have 100 Java files inside your project, you start seeing the need for design patterns, like where would you need a builder pattern, where would you need a factory pattern, something that you want to use only a single copy across the entire app, you can create a singleton for that. So understanding those are definitely very important. Okay. Then there are the higher level patterns. So the OOP patterns are how you write code, but then there are higher level patterns. What is a clean architecture? So doing domain driven development, where you keep your business logic in the domain does not depend on anything, and then you have data sources which handle the persistence layer. Then you have got the basically the repository layer, the UI layer, the presentation layer. How do you separate all these layers and make them work together? Okay. And then as your project starts becoming complex, as you divide it into different modules, another very crucial toolkit in your bag is going to be dependency injection. So I would suggest you start off with simple dependency injection libraries like Coin, which gives you a little bit of idea about why dependency injection is needed. Because when you start using Coin, you will see that, oh, okay, I was creating this object everywhere. Now I can create a simple Coin DSL and I can just pick that object up from there. My code reduces. You'll visualize why dependency injection is kind of useful. Later on, you should obviously get well versed with the most common dependency injection framework that is used across the Java world and of course across the Android world as well, which is Dagger. Okay, and along with Dagger today there is another library called Hilt, which used along with Dagger makes dependency injection very easy to do on Android. And most big companies with big projects, they are going to be using Dagger. So knowing Dagger is going to be kind of imperative for senior Android engineering roles in those kind of places. Okay. And finally, reactive programming is also something you should take a look at. So a lot of times what happens is that how the data is updated and what to be done when the data is updated, these two pieces of the logic are sometimes written in very different places and you don't want to kind of couple them together. So you write the code which updates the data at some place else, and you write the code of what is to be done when the code is updated, the data is updated at some place else, and then you connect them with either a stream, a reactive stream, or an event listener or something like that. So there are frameworks around how to do these kind of things, which is the RX framework, which is the reactive programming framework. So for Android specific, there is RX Java and RX Android. By the way, when you're doing Kotlin development, you use RX Java. The name of the library is RX Java only, right? So RX is a way to do reactive programming in Android. There are patterns in Kotlin also specifically that are coming out in like these days. We'll discuss about this. But having knowledge of RX is definitely very important for senior Android roles. Android specific concepts that you also need to add to your arsenal to kind of get to a place where you can say that, okay, I know enough about Android. I have done my things so that I can be given the responsibility for a small app for the features of a big app, right? So runtime permission management. These days you can ask for permission for location. You can ask it only when the app is open or when the app is not open at that time as well. A lot of times when there could be different features in your app, and those features might need permissions that are asked at the runtime to the user while that feature is supposed to be used, rather than taking all the permissions in the beginning. How that works, okay? How background tasks work. So your apps, like say Gmail app, is synchronizing your email and downloading your email and there's attachments in the background at different times of the day. So using Work Manager and Alarm Manager to schedule tasks in your app to happen at different periods and execute them in the background even when that app is not open, or even when the phone screen is off and it is just lying on somebody's desk. How to do those kind of things. So knowing those things are important. Dealing with the operating system level providers of Android, like how to fetch users contact details, read SMSs, storage access, these kind of things. So these are all OS level providers. How to use them, that's also something that you need to know. If you deal with multimedia apps, then getting well versed with Exoplayer, which is a third-party library created by Google themselves, but it's not part of Android's core operating system code, which helps you manually fine-tune how videos and audio work, buffering them, coding, decoding them, setting the stream speed, setting the codecs, live streaming video from a certain RTMP URL on the net, these kind of things. So that's in the multimedia domain of stuff. Okay. Then another vertical that if you work with hyper-local apps like delivery apps, etc., e-com apps, you get an idea of working is like the GPS framework, collecting location data of the device, and the Google locations and Google Maps, SDKs, so that you can embed maps, show the user's current location in the map, how to do these kind of things. Again, that's very important. Then another vertical, which is if your app works with maybe gestures or movement, or it's a game kind of an app, those kind of apps need understanding of the Android sensor framework. So there is like the light sensor, the accelerometer, the gravitometer, step sensor for how many steps the person has taken if you're making a healthcare kind of related app, and the gesture detection framework like swipe gestures, double tap, and shake, tilt, these kind of gestures. How to detect those kind of gestures, working on those kind of things is also a very nice thing to have in your toolkit. Okay, and finally, connecting with some of these services that Google has made, like Firebase for analytics, for crash reporting, for push notifications, for doing simple machine learning stuff like detecting objects and all. There is MLKit by Firebase. So understanding all of these things are like at a senior Android level, we'll be expecting that you would be knowing these kind of things as well. Okay. So once you've done this, once you've come to this point, so congratulations, you are capable enough to be sitting for interviews for a senior Android engineer role. The fundamentals that we discussed for a basic Android engineer, those are obviously going to be asked, but some of these things like your experience with working on these Android component that we just discussed, those are also starting to be important when you're looking at a senior Android engineering role. Okay. Now that we understood till here, what is it that you need to push you to that final level where you could be like a Android architect or Android team lead? Okay, let's talk about those things. Okay, so here comes obviously where at a team level, you're not just writing code, but you're setting up culture for the team. You're setting up the way the team works. You're setting up the workflow for the entire team as well. And for that, obviously, you are the one who's responsible for designing and developing testing architecture, how tests are written for your project, how would you automate those tests so every time somebody makes a pull request to the GitHub repository, the tests are automatically going to be running, which tests should run on which kind of pull request, designing those things, automating the release workflow as well, so that making an Android app release should not be a very manual task as your teams start growing, like the kind of teams which need an Android architect or a lead kind of position to handle the Android team. They would also be needing like automation in how the app is released. They would need weekly release cadence so that every week releases happen. So you should have a setup in place so that you can record UI tests, work with the QA team, record UI tests so that they can be automated. Use frameworks like Mockito or Mocha, which can mock out certain parts of the app which while testing are needed. So for example, you want to mock some fake data coming from the API while the tests are running, because real data, you can't run tests on real data because the real data keeps changing. So you can't, so for example, taking an example of Twitter app, right? So if you test with real data, every time you open the app, a different tweet is there at the top because somebody else has tweeted something new by that time. But when you're testing, you would probably want a consistent response. So you can test that, every time I open with this set of response, this is the tweet at the top and I can see it. Okay. So mocking things out in that sense is essential. So all of these, CI/CD testing, mocking, and QA automation. That's a whole bucket of things that are very important, and for most senior Android engineering and beyond kind of roles, like where you are getting on board to be a lead or an architect, there's going to be a lot of interview questions around this, like what are your opinions on this? In a previous place you worked, what kind of automation systems that you had set up? What are your opinions on what will you set up here? If you join us, those questions will be coming, right? Then managing large Android projects become a very defining feature for somebody who wants to be grow more further in the Android vertical and then become an Android architect, is that bigger projects also have bigger teams. So when you have bigger teams, you want to divide the code base in such a way that people's work don't conflict with each other, and to do that you would be creating separate Gradle modules. At Zomato we had 60 plus Gradle modules. At Target, we have 300 plus Gradle modules, right? I think so. how do you work with code bases which have so many Gradle modules? How do they come together and build? Uber is the famous example of having, I think, more than 1,500 modules in their project, right? Then when your build system becomes so complex, so writing custom Gradle scripts so that during the app getting built there could be some other operations that are happening. There could be analytics of the build itself, so if somebody's build fails, it triggers an alert automatically around that. Okay, pulling in different maybe security keys which are needed to build, those kind of things you have to write down in a build script. So understanding how Gradle works, and understanding how alternatives to Gradle like Buck, which is made by Facebook, and Bazel, which is made by Google, as separate as alternative to Gradle, which are getting used by some apps these days, because Gradle builds in very big projects can take up to 20-25 minutes time, fresh clean build, right? Build systems like Buck and Bazel have been designed to reduce that build time, make the developer experience better. So a little bit of exploring in those domains would be helpful if you're aspiring to get to that point, right? Creating custom views. So as your app grows and your design team grows, they will be coming up with very bespoke looking UI components, which are very different from what you can achieve with the material design toolkit or what is default available on Android. So how do you make custom, say for example, at Zomato, we had a loader which looked like a slice of pizza. At Target, the Target's logo is circular, so we use that as a loader. How to design custom loaders like that? Both like in terms of implementing the somebody has designed it in After Effects. How do you write that down in Kotlin code, drawing things on the screen pixel by pixel to make those kind of loaders? How do you make custom view kind of components? How do you make a circular view or a star-shaped view? These kind of things, start getting important to know these things. Okay. Then with big apps, what happens is you have to develop some base set of rules that run in every activity, in every recycler view, so that your team does not have to do more and more boilerplate work, right? So every time a new fragment is opened, maybe some analytics data is supposed to be sent to your analytics server. So you would create a base fragment in which you would keep the analytics code, and everybody who is creating a fragment would be extending from the base fragment. Okay. Developing such common patterns inside your app's code base is again something which is going to be expected from you at this point. So writing custom base activities, base recycler views, base fragment that the rest of your team would be using. It starts becoming a little platform level work. It's called platform work because you are developing components that are going to be used by other developers to build features. Okay. Right. And mostly in big teams, your Android leads and architects, they are generally the ones who are leading the platform team. They don't directly work on features. They work on the components that are needed by the rest of the team to make their life easier, right? Performance optimization using Android Profiler, detecting memory leaks, using leak canary. You should be the guy who should be always looking for ways to make your app smaller, faster, leaner, meaner, all of that stuff. You should be at the forefront of doing those things. As a senior Android engineer, if you develop the attitude as well as the skills to be able to, make your app free of memory leaks, crashes, tune it for faster performance. There are a lot of things like this async layout inflator. So inflating the layout can become a time-taking process if the layout is complex. So there's an asynchronous layout inflator as well, which you could be using. These kind of things start becoming, more and more important. Okay. So, and then finally, you should also be somebody who has a finger on the pulse of the Android ecosystem. Stay in touch with all the latest and greatest stuff that is happening, right? Watch Google I/O, see the direction in which the makers of the Android SDK and the Android OS team, what new things that they are thinking for the next version of Android, right? Stay in touch with those things. New libraries that are coming in an alpha level, beta level, trying those out and seeing if they can be useful for your team to use eventually. Those things start becoming very important. So today, speaking, it's in 2021, I think some of the latest and greatest today is a lot of people are starting to build UI using Jetpack Compose instead of using XML. So take a look at that, how that is working, right? And evaluate the pros and cons, whether in your team using Jetpack Compose would be a good idea or not. These days in Kotlin, there are a lot of new experimental features like flows, streams, and coroutines, which together can give you an alternative to RxJava. And a lot of apps are starting to move towards that. because the syntax is much more easier to see. So how can you develop an alternative to RxJava using coroutines and flows? Something like that. Maybe you can read about that. Dynamic delivery. So you can deliver smaller features of your app later on after the app has been downloaded. So the app size becomes small, and people download the app. They can use the basic features. If they try to use a certain other feature, then the separate component of the app will get downloaded. So this is something I was doing at Zomato before I left, and I could not actually complete. Was Zomato's chat module is actually written in React Native, so that kind of is it makes the app size of the app 4 or 5 MB more. We could reduce the size of the app by 4 or 5 MB if we remove that. And not everybody is chatting. Like when they download the Zomato app, the first thing that they want to do is order. Like if their order does not go through, they might want to chat. At that point, we can download the chat component into the app and do it. So we can use something like dynamic delivery and feature modules to achieve that. And understanding how these things work again would be something that would be your responsibility if you are the Android lead or the architect, right? Uh, like we discussed, custom views, similarly custom animations as well using motion layout. Again, latest and greatest stuff. You should cover things like that. Once you've done all of that, so congratulations, you are at the point where you should be looking at within your own team, become somebody who leads initiatives, right? Or when you're looking at openings and there is an Android architect or a lead Android engineer or a principal Android engineer kind of openings, and you are at this point, you have garnered all the experience that I've talked about till now, you can start applying to those kind of positions at this point. Okay. So I hope this was helpful, both the first part and the second part of these videos, and I really hope that people who are starting off in their journey as Android developers, these videos give them an idea of what are the things that they need to know for various levels of Android engineers that the industry is looking for. By the way, to become like a senior or lead Android engineer, there's a lot of system design and low level design, builder patterns, and design patterns, object oriented. These kind of things you need to cover. And what better place to cover these things than attend a Scalar masterclass? So visit scalar.com. Just scroll to the bottom. There is you will find a link to the masterclasses, and we have masterclasses every week, every few weeks, and most of these masterclasses deal with system design patterns, the exact set of things that you need as an engineer, whether it's mobile developer or whether as a general engineer, you need to understand these kind of things as you want to grow. So go ahead to scalar.com, register for the next masterclass that is coming up, and brush up your concepts on system design. Along with that, definitely like, share, and subscribe this video if this was helpful. We would be coming up with more such roadmaps in the next few days.
Hi, folks. So we'll talk about any and every question that any one of you has about Android. So one of the first pieces that a lot of people asked me about was a lot of people ask about Android development these days is whether we should go with a native Android development, we should do Kotlin, or whether we should go with one of these hybrid frameworks like Flutter or React Native. So I think maybe that's one of the questions that we can pick up first. And in fact, that's the first few questions that have come. Dakshdeep and Akash have already said the same thing, so we can definitely pick up probably Akash's questions, Flutter or Kotlin. First of all, job market speaking, I think that's what a lot of people ask about. So job market wise, the maximum number of jobs that are there, I think 90% of the jobs out there in the market are in native Android development, which means that it's going to be in Java and Kotlin. Okay. Now, that's the market situation as of today. Flutter is definitely growing. By the way, React Native is also there. Okay, so don't forget that React Native is also there. React Native, the kind of apps that React Native was used on largely, today a lot of this market is getting captured by Flutter. Now, there are particularly new startups where having separate Android and iOS teams is difficult. Very early stage startup, that's one of the places where Flutter is getting used. Two, I would say, is agencies. So, design agencies, marketing agencies who also make apps for some of their clients, or small app studios who make projects for small companies, right? That's another space where Flutter is, has become sort of common today. So coming to your answer, I would say which one to pick. And a couple of things. Now, if you are proficient already in Java, by the way, okay, and you want to build up a very serious career in mobile development, you want to earn a good bit of money and you want to make a serious, 4 or 5 year long career in Android development. Today, the answer to that is still going with Java and Kotlin, right? Java and Kotlin, by the way, Kotlin is the new wave in which apps are made. But today, if you go for interviews for Android development, you would need to know both Java and Kotlin. It's very important that you understand this, that both Java and Kotlin, knowing them is important. Okay. Now about Flutter, I would say if you're a web developer, just for example, you're not so well versed in Java, but you're making websites, and sometimes you make a project and you feel like, okay, can I also would have made an Android app for it or iOS app for it, and just the mobile website would not be sufficient. You might need that app to be on the mobile offline first support or something like that. You can probably pick up Flutter in that case. Dart would be a language kind of easier, more familiar. Well, by the way, Dart is familiar whether you're coming from Java or Kotlin or coming from JavaScript. All of them are very similar languages to be pretty familiar. What Flutter does not solve very well is, the fact that there are a lot of external libraries for image manipulation, for video processing, for payment ecosystems. So these kind of things, there are a lot of third-party libraries. They exist only in Java and in Kotlin. They don't exist in Flutter. So even if you make Flutter apps and you want to connect deep system level things into it, like video encoding, encryption, these kind of things, you have to integrate, then you will have to write some parts of your code in Swift for iOS and for Kotlin in Android anyway. Right. But if you're fetching information from an API and just simply showing it on the screen, right? A lot of it is just API based current information happening. So if you make a front end for, say, even if we talk about Twitter, so there's a Twitter client, you are showing tweets on the screen, something like that. Flutter is a good framework to come up and build for that. But if you're trying to build something like, say, TikTok, right? Then handling that video processing, that network pipeline, those things. Again, not saying it's not possible, but it's sort of harder. Even with apps like Instagram, which is actually made in React Native, the image processing parts are written completely in native in iOS and in Android. Okay. So I think that answers the Flutter versus Kotlin question at large. And then unless there are anything more specific in this, I would not be picking up this particular question. Going on to the next question, is Raghav Agarwal has said, how to make sure that a layout looks same throughout all devices supported by the app, and are there any tips for that? Now, there is to be an old school thinking, which is you create a portrait layout and landscape layout. Then in portrait, you create a certain width, certain height, these kind of layouts. But the modern understanding of this is that you do how web developers do, how Bootstrap thinks about responsive layouts, right? So you might have two layouts for horizontal and vertical, right, landscape and portrait. But within portrait for different screen sizes, use proportionality based things, like you want first half of your screen to show something, second half of your screen to show something. So you use constraint layout, and within constraint layout there's something called guidelines. So you can create a 0.50 guideline, which is at the middle of your screen, half of it, and then you can put items above it and items below it, and then so on and so forth. So I think today the conversation moreover is about the proportion of the screen to be used. Do you want like three cards to be shown in the screen or two cards to be shown in the screen, and then you just sort of implement that. Don't try to achieve screen specific layouts. Try to create a proportional layout, and then it will work for all screens. That's the modern way of doing apps. Also, one more thing that has happened a lot and people have understood is that people don't rotate their phones a lot unless they're watching media. So if only when people play games and when people watch media, they use landscape. Otherwise, they're always using portrait mode. So a lot of very popular apps by Google, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, many of these apps, they lock the orientation of the activity to portrait mode, which is perfectly fine for you to do that. You won't want to bother about landscape. But for tablets, obviously, you will have to bother, because for tablets, both the orientations happen. But for mobile, locking to portrait mode is something that's a valid thing that a lot of apps use these days. Okay. Whether data structures algorithms are necessary for Android development and how to use. Very important question. Um, so when we talk about data structures and algorithms, it's a broad topic, right? What is needed and what is not needed. So some of the very advanced data structures like trees, tries, red black trees, binary sorted trees, min heap, max heap, uh, you know, say directed graphs. Now, these data structures are used to solve very specific set of problems. Now, understanding how these data structures are created, having the ability to manually write these data structures on your own, like you do in competitive programming, that's not needed for Android development, not for any basic level development job actually for backend, front end, Android, any of them. The the ability to implement these data structures by your hand manually, that's not needed. Okay. Conceptually, if you know them, that's good. But your basic level data structures like stacks, queues, linked lists, hash maps, these are definitely needed because on a daily, day-to-day life, when you're creating apps, these data structures are getting used a lot. Okay. And arrays and strings. Now, very important is that you understand how arrays and strings are manipulated, how they can be manipulated using iterative, recursive ways. A good understanding of where something like a tree can be used, something like a hash map can be used, something like a stack can be used, which problem can be best solved by which data structure. That understanding, if is there, being able to create the data structure on your own without looking up the internet, those kind of things people generally need for programming interviews. Those are not needed for development. But knowing which data structure is supposed to be used where, that knowledge is definitely going to be very useful. So Ram Krishna has a question, which is you want to move to dream companies like Uber, LinkedIn, PhonePe. That's fantastic. For interviews, how should you prepare? Should you learn newer concepts or multi-platform? Okay. Now, interesting. So newer concepts like Jetpack Compose or Kotlin multi-platform, these are definitely not needed to crack interviews. That's for sure. Okay. So any piece of technology, any new library or new way of development that has not existed for more than 2 years, okay, that is not going to be a deal breaker in interviews. It's as simple as that. Big companies don't use new libraries and new frameworks unless they are at least stable version for at least 1 year old like that. Nobody is using alpha beta level stuff, right? So Kotlin multi-platform today, some companies are experimenting a little bit. Jetpack Compose, some companies are early adopters of it. Nobody is going to not take you because you don't know these things. So from a job change perspective, covering these things are not essential. Okay, very, very important. Now, what type of company it is, on basis on that, it depends whether you should do lead code or whether you should do side projects. Now, say for example, a company like PhonePe, I would say doing side projects is better. For a company like Uber, doing lead code is better because companies like Uber and a lot of companies like that, which have big workforces, they do not hire for Android developers. They hire for generic SD2, SD3, these kind of roles. For that, and after you join, by chance you know Android well, they will put you on an Android project. But if you don't know Android well, they don't care. They will put you into whatever project needs current, immediately hands are needed. So companies which hire for generic SD roles, their lead code stuff, that's more important than developing your skill set. But a little smaller, mid-sized company like say Zomato, we used to hire for Android developers particularly. Even at Target, we are hiring for Android developers particularly. We are not generic hiring for any developer. So their data structure algorithm based questions are lesser and platform specific, topic specific questions are more in the interview process. Shirshak's question is about whether people hire specifically with Android only for SD. And I think I just answered that question. Is that some companies do hire for SD's generic roles and some companies do hire for Android specific roles. And if you go and search for job offers, you will find that there are a lot of engineer, software engineer, engineer level 1, level 2, these kind of job offers, and there are also Android engineer kind of job offers on the market, right? So generally, the larger the company is, the more generic the role is. right? Smaller the company, the more specific the role is. If the company has, 5,000, 10,000 employees, engineering employees, then it's most likely more generic. Your topical skills are not so much needed at the interview stage. Okay. Okay, coding Cosmos. Very interesting question. And I feel like a lot of people come up with questions like this, that you're in the fourth sem and you've been doing Android in first sem, and you're worrying about Fuchsia OS and it will replace Android. So this is exactly the effect of hype marketing that it has on young minds of the industry today. Okay, when I was in my fourth sem, I think, not fourth sem, maybe at least seventh sem, that's when I first heard rumors about Fushia. Okay, that's when I heard rumors. Today, it has been 4 more years since then, and Fuchsia, apart from a demo on Google Home device, has not, come out. Now, Kotlin, people say that Kotlin with a new way of development and Java would be obsolete, and they started saying this in 2016. Kotlin, Google said officially that they will, make Kotlin an official language in 2017. In 18, Google said that they will make Kotlin as the primary language for which internal libraries and everything is developed. 2019, many companies started saying that they have started to use Kotlin internally. Big companies started saying, and I think since 2000, from 2016 and 17 time, to 5 years later, 2021, is when Kotlin has actually become mainstream. And in most companies, more than 50% code is written in Kotlin in Android today, right? This starting from 5 years back when Kotlin first started getting used in production-based apps, and it was completely interoperable with Java. Okay, so Fuchsia replacing Android is I mean, this video is gonna be there on YouTube for a long, long time, and I'm gonna be putting my neck out, and I wouldn't want to come back and see this video and see me myself being proved wrong. But within the next 5 years, I don't see Fuchsia becoming more popular than Android. Replacing Android is not even getting there, but Fuchsia being like a serious contender and replacement for Android is not going to happen within the next 5 years. If I take a bet, okay, don't get into those hypes and don't try to prepare for a future that's 5 years away. Okay, because you don't know what's 5 years away. Prepare for the industry today, and as the industry will change, you will adapt to it. That's what everybody does. Okay, people who were hardcore Angular developers, they adapted to React, they have adapted to Vue.js. Those same people who are hardcore Angular developers might have been sometime back Backbone.js or Knockout.js developers. People adapt. It's not like Angular people have become obsolete. They have just adapted to where the industry has gone. Okay. And by the way, one more thing, and this might not sound very sweet and nice coming from me, but from first sem to fourth sem, your Android development skills definitely might have improved, but production level Android apps, I'm sure you're not have started making. Because production level Android apps means having unit tests, integration tests, CI/CD pipeline working, and using dependency injection, Dagger, using RX Java, or maybe these days coroutines in place, and all of these things should be happening. Then only we should say that we are making production level apps. So I believe that just 2 years of effort, you still have a lot of gaps to fill in that space. Okay. So Siddharth has asked, K. Siddharth Sai, are there opportunities for freshers to get a job as an Android developer? Obviously, why not? Lots of people get, I think Android development jobs as freshers. A lot of companies hire. Okay. Uh, by the way, even very big companies like Google kind of companies, they're also people are hired for a generic SD role. Once hired, many of them right from day one, they are made to work on Android or iOS or web or anything. Like, there's no guarantee what kind of project you'll be given. So some bigger company. But at a startup level company, freshers are definitely hired. Like at Zomato, we used to regularly hire freshers in our Android team. And similarly, a lot of companies where my friends work, Swiggy is there, Flipkart is there, uh, Urban Company is there, Ghana.com is there, all of these companies, they hire freshers for Android development jobs. Okay. Abhishek has said weight, like weight of Android apps or my weight. Should I reduce weight, or have you are you seeing me after a long time on YouTube and you're seeing I have reduced weight? If that's yes, I'm flattered. But okay, coming on to the next question. So Himanshu has asked, is Flutter going to be used by tech giants or startups in the future? By the way, Flutter is used by Google to create their own AdSense app. Flutter is used by Zerodha, which is a big company, to make their Kite and Coin apps. And Flutter is used by Alibaba to create their dashboard app. So Flutter has started to be used by some of the bigger companies. None of the very big companies have used Flutter yet for their main apps, primary app. Nobody has used. Startups, many of them have started using Flutter, yes. Like I said, if you are mainly doing a API based and UI based project and device hardware level stuff you're not getting into too much, then Flutter is a good choice to go with, and then you can make an app. Okay, Dipanshu has a question which is which has more career opportunities, web development or Android development? In terms of quantity, web development just has like way more number of job opportunities than Android. It's a bigger domain, it's a bigger field. Also, web is a wide word, right? I mean, you might mean front end, you might mean back end, you might mean full stack. Combining all of those things together, web is a huge domain, right? Today in India, like including service sector, product sector, big company, small company, everything included, if we have 1.5, 1.6 lakh fresh jobs every year in the development space, I think 80 to 90,000 of those would be in the web development space, right? And mobile development space jobs would be 20,000, 25,000 of them in that space. I think the rest of them might be in specific like desktop app security and system administration, these kind of things. So way more number of jobs is available. That is more. But if you look at like way the number of jobs with the median salary, so say jobs that pay 10 lakh per annum. The competition for a 10 lakh per annum job in Android or mobile development is going to be less than the competition for a 10 lakh per annum job in web development. That's there. And as you go a little higher in the salary bracket, like a 15 lakh per annum jobs, I don't think there are more 15 lakh per annum web jobs than there are Android jobs. I think there the numbers start getting a little closer to each other. Right. So that's about a quantity quality assessment on web development versus Android development. Pankaj has a question: where do you think Ionic framework stands when compared to Flutter and React Native? So, by the way, Ionic, Ionic is a little too specific, but Cordova, which is basically running web apps inside Android or iOS app containers, Cordova itself is a framework which it's a platform on which the Ionic framework is also made, and there are other ways to do it as well. Now, Cordova is actually very big, and in fact, in both Android and iOS app stores, uh, the maximum number of apps are the native apps, like the ones made in Objective C and Swift for iOS, or the ones made in Kotlin and Java for Android. That's the native apps are maximum. The second highest number of apps, are in Cordova in both the platforms. And the reason for that is that there are hundreds and thousands of apps which basically are the website of that product wrapped into a app kind of container so that locally things can be stored. Ionic actually also is a subset of that problem. I think compared to native Android development and then React Native and Flutter, I think Ionic, particularly framework specific, is going to be a little less, quite less. But it's not like it does not exist. There's sufficient amount of opportunities in that as well. Could you provide a real-time tutorial for learning Android app? Jitu, you should see the last video that we published. We just published, like, go our channel, like, go back a little, you would find I did a 5-hour video. It was 5 hours of me continuously coding an Instagram clone. We will do more videos like that as well. So definitely check that video out. You would love that video, I'd say. Sahil Tanwar has asked, not worked in Java. So if you have not worked in Java, can you start learning Android development from React Native? I would say yes, you can. Though I would want to warn you that if you're making bigger projects, then having knowledge of how the Android SDK and Java works is gonna sooner or later come and then become useful. Okay. So eventually you will have to learn either Java or Swift or both a little bit to debug some of your issues, right? Um, Where to start? I think there's a free code camp series on React Native. Maybe you can just at least start from there. It's a free tutorial, and then see where it goes. I think for most people, for most things, that's what I suggest. Go to free code camp, try out the technology, see if you're able to get started, make the initial project, and then you can see there are a lot of if there are paid courses, if there are books and all of that stuff. Okay, so the free code camp one is the thing I would suggest. It's the first place to just go and check out. Fenil has asked an interesting question: how to implement the driver routing feature in Zomato app. So that's a NP hard problem, traveling salesman problem, right? So it's not a very Android specific question, and I would be honest, I wasn't involved in the team that worked on the system. But that's kind of like how the traveling salesman problem is solved. It's a subset of that traveling salesman problem. So I think if you take a look at the traveling salesman problem, and that's something at Scalar Academy in our courses we actually do cover. So you'd probably get a taste of how these kind of algorithms are implemented. Ayushman has a question that you're in 6M, have many other projects, but no work experience. How to get internships at good startups, and what should I do? You should apply to a lot of places. For early stage startup internships, a good place to discover. Some of them would be angel.co, AngelList, and you can search for some of them there. Right? That's one place. Another thing I would suggest is get together with some friends of yours and participate in some of the online hackathons where you have to build apps and websites and all. That's also a great place where you learn to translate an idea into a project, which is kind of very useful and very helpful, right? What these interviews try to figure out as well when they ask you the questions. Okay. Raghav is a question: what happens is that sometimes that an application perfectly running on Android Studio crashes after release. This happens because of something called ProGuard and minification. When you make a release mode of your APK, in your early days, you can set ProGuard to false or minify enabled to false. But that's not a good strategy long term to make production ready projects, because obfuscation is important. So follow the ProGuard rules and make sure that all the ProGuard rules are added in your project. That's one thing. Connect your app to Firebase Crashlytics so that all the crashes that happen on release, you get a stack trace of them, so you can start deploying a fix for that. Manish has a question: how can someone start out in Android development as a fresher in COVID times, and how many large projects sufficient? So I think right. The COVID time part is probably irrelevant, right? Because the answer is sort of going to be the same whether it's because of pandemic or without the pandemic and all that. I mean, go to developer.android.com, learn the basics, and start building some apps, and then start thinking of some projects like a to-do list manager, a scientific calculator, note-taking app, these kind of projects, and start building something like that. That would obviously be a good way to learn certain skills in Android development that are needed to be able to build such projects. Okay, how many large projects? I think you should have two, three smaller projects that you have built over a week or less kind of time, and you should have maybe three, four, uh, you know, probably contributions to some projects, which are little larger in terms, or you can probably set up a group of your friends, like-minded friends, and you can set up an open source project of your own as well, and that is something that you can do. Okay, so Rushikesh asked about progressive web apps, cross-platform versus native development. Now, progressive web apps are just basically way to install your normal web application, add a shortcut to that in your home screen, and do a little bit of local cache and push notifications, but largely they are sort of powerless. Cross-platform versus native, I think I had just discussed already a little bit. The trade-offs come between cost, which is like about having two teams for different native uh, products, or do you have one team which develops the app for both the products? Those kind of cost calculations come into the picture, right? So based on that, we basically decide whether to go with a cross-platform or a native implementation. My first time I saw a big open source project which gave me a very good idea about good architecture was Firefox's Android app. Right. Nowadays, Firefox has two, three apps. There is the original Firefox Android app, then there's a Firefox Focus app. I mean, you might love to see that and see that project structure, but for little younger people, it might be a little overwhelming. So somewhat on the smaller side, Force Asia has got some good Android projects. I think you can go to GSOC and see last year's Android projects and see their GitHub repos, which is a good place to find out open source projects where the architecture is also good, but not so complex that as a beginner you won't be able to understand it at all. Shopify approach. So Aditya Pahilwani has a Shopify approach, KMM for business and React Native for UI. So both are a couple of different things. KMM for business is something that a lot of companies are thinking of doing. We had started thinking of writing our menu logic in KMM when I was in Zomato because that was a very complex piece of logic and we had to replicate it twice. But we did not depend on a lot of Android or iOS specific stuff to do it. So we thought that we should definitely be able to, I don't know, sort of use it as a and we can use it like that. Now the UI with React Native part is something that some people decide whether you want to have a common UI effort or not. And I think it depends on the kind of team and all you have set up and whether you want to create a common design language and or you do have very strong UI teams on Android as well as iOS already available in your team. Now, if you have that, then you don't need to create a common effort for UI. Now, React plus KMM is good, though that means that you would need like for a lot of for Shopify, I think for Shopify they would need somebody with React understanding, they would need somebody with KMM understanding, and they would need people with native Android Kotlin and native Swift understanding as well to fix certain features. So that every different technology stack that you keep adding, you need expertise in all of them. And as your apps are bigger and more complex, and they are running on lots of different devices, then native level knowledge becomes unavoidable and it is needed because there will be certain crashes which happen in the native layer. So you'll need somebody with native Android development experience and native iOS development experience to be able to fix those bugs. For bigger companies, I think it does make sense where common implementations which can be changed quickly by changing one implementation, you are able to change the UI on both those kind of things can happen. Now, many businesses use KMM to make the logic layer common while the UIs are separate. So that's a different part of the problem to be solved. And a lot of people are already doing that. Then a lot of people are also doing this thing is that they're writing the UI in a common framework like Flutter or React Native. And then some platform specific stuff like image processing pipelines, video processing pipelines, they are writing down in native as well. Right. Uh, and that's kind of the state right now. Shopify is one of the rare examples who is doing both of those things. They're trying to make things common at the UI layer as well, and then at the bottom of the business layer as well, they're trying to make things a little bit common. Where did I miss the next question? Siddharth asks, does the associate Android developer certification Google benefit us while applying for Android developer jobs? I haven't seen that actually to affect a lot, to be very honest. Gives a little bit of foot through the door. Like if somebody has that associate Android developer certification, then resume shortlisting layer, it might help a little bit. Especially like if your prior work experience is not in an Android development role, or you are not from a very good college. In those cases, if that certification is there, that helps a little bit. If you have already made Android projects, if you are from a tier 1 or 2 college, or if you already interned in Android development role or worked in Android development role already, then you don't need to go for that certification. It does not add anything more to value to your profile. Good companies to aim for summer internship Android. I think that I wouldn't have right now any idea of. Mostly you should check out obviously some of your favorite apps that you use, some popular apps, and then try to reach out to the recruiters via LinkedIn and see if their internship opportunities open. Many companies do not have internship opportunities explicitly mentioned on the internet, but if you ask the recruiters and you say that you are good on Android development, you have made some projects, do you have internship opportunities? Maybe somebody might say yes. Okay. What do you see in an intern for second year pass out? Second year pass out. What do you mean by second year pass out? Like if you're in second year, then you're not pass out, right? But okay, fine. I'll just say that if you are in your third year and you want to intern, I don't know. I mean, I don't want to see a lot of skills apart from the urge to learn new things, and if it's in a startup-ish atmosphere, then being a self-starter. That for every two things, every third thing, every fourth thing, you won't come to your whoever is your internship mentor or your engineer whom you're assigned to. You don't just come and bother them. You take a piece of problem given to you and you figure things out on your own as much as possible. So that attitude you have, that's probably more important that I try to see. Vignesh has asked how to prepare for freelancing and Android development. Portfolio building is important. So go to GitHub, make projects which are finished, okay, end to end, finished, put up on the Play Store. Get your friends and family to use it. Try to get 500,000 or 1,000 downloads. Even that's fine. But put it on GitHub. GitHub should have a README of that project. It should tell what the project was about. Like, packaging is very important, which helps you build a sort of freelance side career. For future perspective with Android, is it better to learn iOS or backend? If you're not spent at least 4 or 5 years in Android, then just continue to spend time in Android itself. There's a lot of depth to it. Okay. Otherwise, decide if you really, really love mobile development, right? Making mobile apps is something that you really passionately fall in love with. Then maybe learning iOS or Flutter or React Native, another framework, is sort of helpful. But if you learn backend, then you become versatile. You can work on projects where both backend and frontend are needed, and you can work on both things yourself simultaneously together. I think an Android developer who moves into backend probably adds two very large skill sets, which can give career growth wise, salary wise, better opportunities. Is what I feel. There's a small question about Target offering summer Android internships or not. So just to answer that question, no, I think there isn't. Right. So this is just full-time people are getting hired right now. So just answering that question. Santosh has asked web development or Android development for students in 6M. If you're a student, I will give you only one advice. That is, people excel in things that they like. There's this whole concept, Japanese concept of finding or ikigai, which is things that you are good at, things that you like, and things that you can use to make money or make a career out of. Okay. The intersection of these three things is what you should be doing, right? That's your ikigai. So you are generally good at certain things if trying to solve problems in that domain keep you up at night, sleepless nights, and you're very passionate about it. So try out web development, Android development, both for one week each. See which one excited you. See which one is stopping you from going to sleep. Right. So that is probably very important to discover what you really like. Once you figure out what you really like, put all your energy into it. You might figure out Android is what you like. You might figure out web is what you like. You might figure out you don't like either of them and you like something else like data science or machine learning. Well, whatever. But if you spend some time figuring out what you like, that is the best investment of your time and energy. Right. And based on that, take a pick. Don't try to pick web versus Android based on which senior said this is supposed to be taken because it has more scope, or whether you look at job offers today and you pick that. If you are among the top people doing anything, you can be very successful and earn a lot of money and travel countries and all of that stuff. So don't try to optimize for, okay, this domain has more jobs or this field pays more and all of that stuff. pick up whichever one makes you feel better, whichever one you really feel like you like, and then you will automatically be very passionate about it, automatically learn a lot of things inside it. That's going to be important. What is easier to make? Eugene has asked, wallpaper app, Android Flutter Studio, or Flutter. What is easier to make? I think wallpapers can be probably easy to make if you just use a pattern based wallpaper or something like that, right?
So I think one of the last questions I would pick up. Parth Patel has asked how to develop skills for prod level development before getting a job. Do something prod level. I think make an app of your own, try to put it up on the Play Store, and then open source its code, and then maybe ask your friends to come and contribute. That's one of the best ways to, uh, do this. Setting up CI/CD etc. using GitHub Actions on your side projects, and then doing automatic code reviews and all these kind of things you can set up, right? Aarti Negi has asked whether she should switch to Flutter or not, and I think that if you already are a good Android developer, you have made some apps, then you can learn Flutter. Additionally, it's not called switching; it's just adding, broadening your horizons. I have learned Flutter 2 years back, although I was very successful Android developer at that time. That's just increasing your social presence, and making sure you stay in touch with latest trends. So for that you can do that. Okay. Should I know testing and CI/CD for putting my app on Google Play Store? Ayushman has asked. Uh, so yes and no. I mean, you don't need testing and CI/CD knowledge to just put the app on Play Store, but if you have gotten an app to a place where you can put it on Play Store, that level of confidence you have gotten out of building apps, then I think yes, this answers that if you set up testing, if you set up CI/CD, it will make your life a whole lot easier, and it will prepare you for production level stuff that you need to do at jobs. But it would be great if you have these skills, and then they help you publish that app much more easily as well. Your code base is always tested, you know, and your automatically you can deploy your app to Play Store, and as well those kind of things you can do. Abhishek Sharma has asked that I'm new to dependency injection, so should I start with Dagger or Hilt? Hilt is a wrapper over Dagger. Hilt is not separate from Dagger, so you need to know Dagger to use Hilt. Hilt is just it reduces the amount of code that you need to write with Dagger, but Hilt is built on top of Dagger. If you don't know Dagger, then you don't know how to use Hilt. Okay. Bye everybody.